Cole Hari had committed every line of the missive to memory. 3 months of exchanges, every aspect arranged, every feeling meticulously penned in tidy script that vowed an existence he'd merely fantasized about. He lingered at the boundary of his land, eyeing the rising plume of grit on the distant skyline, his pulse thumping in his chest like a trapped beast. The carriage halted before his humble homestead, and the reinsman doffed his cap in silence. Yet as the tarp parted, Cole's air hitched in his windpipe. 2 ladies descended, mirroring each other in all the vital respects. The same russet locks gleaming in the daylight like burnished brass, the same emerald gazes, the same refined contours that aligned with the betrayal in each epistle he'd gotten. One glided with serene poise, her gown spotless after the arduous trek, palms clasped demurely as she scanned the surroundings with broad, nearly timid orbs. The other alighted with resolve, her matching attire oddly creased, her jaw lifted in a manner implying she dreaded naught and nobody. They each bore the identical battered hide pouch, they each sported the same gold pendant dangling from their throats, and as they regarded him, they each grinned with the identical lips he'd pictured pressing on endless solitary evenings. Mr. Ramsay, the milder one, ventured initially, her tone gentle as dawn mist. "I'm Ellie Baxter, your intended." "Nay," the other cut in, advancing with orbs harboring thunderheads. "I'm Mira Baxter, and I reckon there's been a mix-up of sorts." Cole's palm reflexively drifted to the notes in his vest flap. 3 months of deliberate wooing that had built to this instant. But as he glanced betwixt the 2 mirroring females, both asserting the identical moniker, both toting mirroring possessions, he grasped that all he'd presumed about his meticulously mapped tomorrow had just crumbled like parched soil. The reinsman snapped his lash and departed sans a backward glance, stranding Cole solitary with 2 mirroring unknowns, who inexplicably both grasped particulars of his existence that solely his genuine match ought to grasp, particulars that were inconceivable for both to hold. The quiet extended amongst them like a strained cord, primed to break. Cole's orbs flicked from one female to the next, hunting for any variance, any marker that might unravel this baffling enigma. But every speckle, every arc of their visages, every filament of russet tress appeared flawlessly aligned. "Ma'ams," Cole uttered, his timbre gruffer than planned, "there's evidently some muddle. Maybe if we might settle and unravel this fittingly." The milder one, the initial to utter, inclined her head swiftly, ease washing her traits. "Naturally, Mr. Ramsay. I grasp this must be daunting. In my notes, I noted how I aided my kin with her confectionery in New Orleans prior to the gale claimed it all." Cole's veins chilled like winter streams. Those precise phrases had graced the 3rd note he'd gotten, inscribed in precise lettering regarding kin and bereavement and the yearning for a new beginning. "The gale," the other female uttered, edging nearer with orbs that appeared to bore straight into him. "The one that ignited when Mr. Landry's levee gave way. I forfeited all that morn, which is why I heeded your notice." Her timbre bore the identical tale, yet laced with a sharpness of iron that set Cole's flesh to crawl. He withdrew the notes from his flap, his palms quivering slightly, as he uncreased the initial one. "Which of y'all penned of the alderman dubbed Beaumont?" "I did," they both voiced in unison. "And the formula for cornbread muffins your gran passed down?" "That was me," echoed the refrain once more, neither female yielding. Cole scrutinized their countenances, seeking any fissure in their assurance. The milder one nibbled her bottom lip, a motion that struck as anxious and sincere. The bolder one locked his stare sans wavering, her mandible fixed in a fashion that challenged him to doubt her. "This defies reason," he grumbled, raking a palm through his ebony mane.
How might y'all both fathom these matters? How might y'all both bear the identical moniker, the identical story, the identical visage? The bolder one interjected. For we're kin, Mr. Ramsay, twin kin, and it appears somebody has wrought a mighty harsh prank on us all. The term kin struck Cole like a solid strike. Twin kin, both avowing to be his match, both privy to private minutiae from moons of dialogue? His thoughts whirled via scenarios, each more unsettling than the prior. But the moniker, he urged. Y'all can't both be Ellie Baxter. The milder one gazed to her palms. My name is Ellie Baxter, she murmured gently. And mine, the other declared resolutely, is Mira Baxter. But the notes I dispatched were inscribed Nora Baxter. Cole sensed the earth lurch underfoot. You mean y'all've been posing as another? Mira's orb sparked with a peril of sorts. I mean somebody has been employing both our names, both our stories, for motives we ain't yet fathomed. The question is, Mr. Ramsay, who do you reckon is truly meant to be present? Ere Cole could retort, the clamour of nearing steeds resounded over the dale, and his veins froze solid when he identified the horseman heading them. Vance Colton alighted his ebony charger with the fluid assurance of a gent who commanded all he beheld. Two other horsemen bookended him, their palms lounging idly on their holster straps in a vein that implied they weren't mere farmhands. Vance's ashen eyes roved the tableau afore him, Cole positioned betwixt two mirroring females like a gent snarled in a snare. My, Vance lilted, doffing his lid to reveal silver-threaded hairs that snared the midday glow. Seems felicitations are due, Ramsay. Though I must admit I wasn't expecting such plenty in your wedlock setups. Cole's mandible clenched. This here's a personal affair.
Colton, you ain't welcome. Now that's where you err. Vance's grin never touched his orbs as he neared the wee cluster. You observe, I hold a stake in your cozy household plight, particularly given the obligation you bear me. What obligation? Ellie queried softly, edging a touch rearward of Cole. Mira, though, advanced, her emerald orbs appraising Vance with the fervor of an eagle eyeing quarry. You're the gent who's been angling to claim this spread? Vance's brows arched in feigned astonishment. Sharp, lass. Aye, I've tendered Mr. Ramsay sundry lavish bids for this holding. Bids he's daftly spurned. He wheeled back to Cole with a mind that shed all veneer of cordiality. But now you've yourself wedded, or doubly so, as it seems. Well, that alters the lawful state markedly. How so? Cole pressed. Wedlock pacts, old chap. Obligations shifted to mates. Shared holding statutes. Vance prowled them languidly like a scavenger. Naturally, there's the minor issue of deceit, plural unions, entry anomalies. His stare pinned on the twins. Lest, of course, these ma'ams can attest their rightful claim to be here. Cole sensed fury swell in his torso. You whelp of a... Easy now, one of Vance's hands uttered, his palm drifting to his sidearm. But 'twas Mira who startled them wholly by chuckling, a tone keen as shattering crystal. You contrived this, she declared, her timbre bearing utter conviction. The notes, the bewilderment, the lot. You required Cole in a lawfully tangled spot. Vance's grin broadened. That's a hefty charge from a lass who owns to journeying here under sham guises. We owned to naught, Ellie uttered, her mild timbre abruptly firm. Somebody employed our monikers, somebody who fathomed minutiae of our existences that solely kin would ken. Kin? Mira echoed, her orbs never quitting Vance's visage. Or somebody who's been shadowing us for an age. The fragments commenced aligning in Cole's thoughts like tiles cascading in order.
the opportune arrival of the notes, the mirroring wisdom both females held. The man of Vance had materialized mere instants post their advent. "You cur," Cole exhaled. "You trailed them. You duplicated their notes, their tales." "Substantiated," Vance defied. But ere any could rejoin, Ellie inhaled sharply and gestured toward the abode. "Somebody's within." All stares veered toward Cole's abode, where a silhouette flitted by the pane with calculated intent. "You exploited us. You bartered our yarns, our existences." "I preserved your existences," Evelyn barked. "Your sire's wagering obligations would have landed y'all in far grimmer straits than this. At least here, one of y'all might snag a solid mate." Mira advanced, her palms balled into knuckles. "You mean you ferried us like stock to auction?" But 'twas Vance who rejoined, his timber sleek as satin o'er iron. "Not bartered, lass, swapped your kin's obligations for your yielding. Mr. Ramsay's spread for his lawful woes. All gain what they require. Save," Cole uttered softly, his timber-bearing apparels keen, "I don't recollect consenting to any of it." Vance's grin expanded. "Which leads to the splendor of the plight. You're now wed, or nigh to be, to females who voyaged here under sham claims. That renders you complicit in deceit." Cole's palm reflexively sought the long arm absent there. He'd stowed it indoors, ne'er foreseeing a need for safeguard on what should have been the merriest dawn of his days. "Linger rear of me," he bade the females, but Mira was already striding toward the abode with the resolute gait of one who dreaded zilch. "Mira, cease!" Ellie hissed, but her sibling was past heeding. Vance's chuttling sliced the strain like a dagger. "How thrilling! Seems your return bears yet more astonishments than foreseen." Cole disregarded him, his heed wholly on the form that had now materialized in his entryway. A female trod onto the veranda, lofty, refined, with hoary traces drawn taut and garb that proclaimed wealth and command. She appraised the spectacle afore her with the cold valuation of a magistrate issuing verdict. "Mrs. Hargrove," Vance hailed with true delight. "Perfect juncture as ever." The elder female stare alighted on the twins, and a glint traversed her traits. Acknowledgement, perhaps, or contentment. "Mr. Colton, I perceive our pact has advanced precisely as charted." Ellie emitted a wee choked noise. "Aunt Evelyn!" The female's heed snapped to her. "Greetings, Ellie." Mira, her timber bed no fervor, merely the weary acceptance of one fulfilling a distasteful yet vital chore. "What brings you here, Mira?" But even her bold assurance seemed rattled by this unforeseen gathering. "Tidying your sire's mess order, as I've done these score years past." Evelyn Hargrove descended the veranda, her motions precise and restrained. "He was indebted to Mr. Colton a hefty sum ere his passing. Coin that don't just vanish 'cause the borrower ain't amongst us no more." Cole sensed the realm swaying round him. "What ties this to me? To my match?" "Your match," Evelyn uttered with sour mirth, "was ne'er authentic, Mr. Ramsay. The notes, the dialogue, the deliberate suiting, all invented to draw you into a lawfully tying accord with not one, but two females of dubious standing." "That's inconceivable," Cole objected. "I got notes for moons, private minutia, yarns I shared," Evelyn cut in. "Every syllable deftly forged from years of observing my nieces, logging their existences, their aspirations, their confidences. Lore that grew mighty precious when Mr. Colton sought purchase against a mulish herder who balked at yielding his spread." Ellie's visage had blanched like moonbeams.
"Lest, of course, you'd sooner yield your spread and depart untainted." The snare was flawless, refined in its malice. But as Cole beheld Ellie's alarmed visage and Myra's scorching ire, he fathomed aught Vance hadn't reckoned. He was tumbling into affection with both. The epiphany struck Cole like a tangible thud as he observed Ellie's subdued fortitude surface beneath her mild shell, and Myra's vehement safeguarding of her sibling amid their dire straits. These weren't pieces in another's ploy. They were females who'd been double-crossed as utterly as he. "There's aught you overlooked, Colton," Cole uttered, his timbre bearing a serenity that astonished even him. "Oh, what's that?" "I ain't departing." Vance's assurance wavered for the first. "Don't play the dolt, Ramsay. You hold no lawful footing. These females can't attest they're here rightfully. Then I'll wed both." The utterance lingered in the ether like powder haze. Evelyn Hargrove's poised mask fractured. Vance's hands fidgeted uneasily. Even Ellie and Myra gaped at him in astonishment. "That's unlawful," Vance stammered. "But proclaiming my aim to do so brews ample lawful tangle to bog your deceit claims for moons, perchance annums." Cole edged nearer the twins, his resolve hardening with each utterance. "And meantime, I retain my spread. These ma'ams gain safeguard from whatever obligations you assert they bear. And you must account to a national arbiter why you've been shuttling females cross boundary lines for obligation gathering." Evelyn's visage paled. "You misconstrue the powers you're defying. Test me." But it was Myra who voiced next, her timbre slicing the strain like a sabre. "There's aught else y'all don't ken." She delved into her pouch and drew a hide dossier bound with cord. "Our sire didn't solely bequeath obligations upon his demise. He bequeathed us extraction privileges to a copper vein in Arizona that's yielded constant these two annums." The quiet that ensued was thunderous. "That's inconceivable," Evelyn sighed. "He squandered all wagering." "He squandered all you fathomed," Ellie uttered, softly edging beside her sibling. "But he ne'er informed you of the vein he registered under our dam's birth name. We merely unearthed it post his demise when the barristers reached us." Vance's visage had shifted from assured to scheming to nigh frenzy. "How ample?" "Plenty," Myra uttered with dour glee. "To settle whatever obligations you assert we bear. Claim this spread doubly, and yet retain ample to render existence mighty uneasy for any who's been puppeteering us." Evelyn retreated a pace, her poise at last splintering utterly. "You're fibbing. You hold no coin, or you wouldn't have heeded a postal match notice." "We heeded no notice," Ellie uttered, her mild timbre bearing iron. "We voyaged here 'cause somebody was penning notes in my moniker to an unknown, and we yearnt to fathom why." Cole sensed fragments slotting into place. "You voyaged here to probe?" "We voyaged here," Myra uttered, "to unearth who was pilfering our guises and why. We ne'er foresaw landing amid a territory seizure." Vance's palm drifted toward his sidearm, but halted when he noted all stares upon him. "This alters naught. You still can't substantiate deceit." "Truly," a new timbre hailed from astern them. "I reckon they can." All wheeled to behold a gent in a grit-dusted duster nearing a horse, a silver star gleaming on his breast. Abaft him rode two more gents, their long arms evident in their saddle sheaths. "Marshal Donovan," Vance uttered, his timbre reined tight. "What draws you this direction?" The lawman alighted leisurely, his orbs absorbing the spectacle. "Got some intriguing wires about vanished females and falsified dialogue.
Seems there's been a heap of postal deceit afoot in these environs. He fixed on Evelyn Hargrove. Mrs. Hargrove, I reckon you owe some accounting. Evelyn Hargrove's meticulously built poise splintered like frost 'neath a mild dawn. Marshal, I can account. Certain you can, ma'am. But first I'd favour hearing from these youthful ma'ams. Marshal Donovan's worn-time visage was kindly yet resolute as he neared Ellie and Myra. Miss Baxter, I surprise. You can our true monikers, Myra uttered. Astonishment glints across her traits. Got a wire from a barrister in New Orleans 3 dawns past. Seems somebody's been mimicking you, ma'ams, in dialogue across 3 realms. We've trailed this venture for weeks. Vance's visage had ashened, yet his timber held steady. Marshal, I reckon there's a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding is how long you figured you could sustain this ruse ere capture. He withdrew a creased parchment from his duster. Hold a wit here for postal deceit, collusion, and shuttling. That's merely the onset. Cole advanced, his thoughts churning. How many more? How many gents akin to me? 7 we tally, all herders or holding keepers who balked at yielding. All abruptly beset with legal snags involving sham wedlocks or dubious trade allies. The lawman's orbs steeled. Cunning setup. Spawn woes solvable only by yielding holdings at far under worth. Ellie edged nearer Cole, her flank grazing his limb. The mere brush sent warmth through his torso, and he marked how she instinctively sought his ward. What befalls us henceforth? Well, miss, that hinges on what y'all do want to befall. Myra interposed between them, her emerald eyes vehement. We crave reckoning, and we crave to ensure no others suffer from these folk.
Evelyn chortled sourly. Reckoning? Y'all too scarce ken what reckoning exacts. Your sire's obligations are genuine, lasses. The coin he was owed don't fade 'cause you've come into some vain inheritance. Truly, Donovan uttered evenly, it does. Especially when those obligations stemmed from unlawful wagering dens that Mr. Colton here operated out of the rear of his tavern. The disclosure struck like a bolt. Vance's unlawful wagering had spawned the obligations, granting him sway o'er the clans. The postal deceit ploy was just the tool to reap holdings he couldn't lawfully wrest. You whelp of a cur, Cole exhaled, comprehensions surging through him. You spawned the obligations, then tendered the sole remedy? But Vance was already in motion, his palm lashing to his sidearm with honed swiftness. Ain't nobody restin' aught from me. The clang of his iron, freeing hide stilled all save Marshal Donovan, whose own iron materialized in his grasp with the smooth flow of vast practice. Drop it, Colton. For a pulse, time teetered on a razor's brim. Then Vance's orbs veered to Ellie, nearest him, and his iron arced toward her with lethal aim. If I can't claim the spread, none can. Cole hurled himself ahead sans forethought, his form interposing betwixt the iron and Ellie. But 'twas Mira who attained them first, barreling her sibling to the turf, just as the roar of shots rent the midday hush. Through the haze and tumult, Cole spied Vance reel rearward, clasping his flank as Marshal Donovan's aides closed in. But his ease was fleeting when he caught Mira's keen wail of agony. Crimson was seeping across her gown where Vance's errant blast had struck true. Crimson drenched Mira's gown like poured claret on pale linen, and Cole's realm constricted to the widening scarlet blot across her left flank. She remained aware, but wan, her vehement emerald orbs now hazed with torment and jolt. Haul her indoors, Cole bade, cradling Mira in his limbs with unforeseen tenderness for a gent of his bulk. Her crown lolled against his torso, and he sensed her quaking despite her bids to seem sturdy. Ellie dashed ahead, flinging wide the portal to the homestead and sweeping the galley slab with brisk thrift. Lay her here, she guided, her mild timber firm despite the rivulets tracing her cheeks. As Cole eased Mira onto the slab, their orbs locked for an instant that hung timeless. Even maimed, even exposed, she regarded him with a fervor that snagged his breath. "Don't you dare eye me like I'm perishing," she breathed, but her wonted blaze was quelled by torment. "Wouldn't fancy it," Cole rejoined, but his palms quivered as he aided Ellie inspect the gash. The slug had traversed the meaty portion of Mira's flank, sparing bone and chief vessels by scant digits. Ellie toiled with adept thrift, rending fabric for swaths and pressing to staunch the flow. "You can healing?" Cole queried. "Our dam was a birth aid," Ellie expounded, sans glancing from her labor. "She schooled us both, but Mira was ever too hasty to grasp rightly." "I weren't," Mira demurred faintly, then flinched as Ellie delved the gash. "I scarce had finer pursuits than committing to mind which leaves staunched flows." "Like tangling with lads double your heft," Ellie uttered, but her timber bore profound fondness neath the fret. Abaft they could heed Marshal Donovan issuing directives to his aides, and the clank of irons as Vance and Evelyn were manacled for conveyance. The pressing peril had passed, but Cole fathomed that the thorniest stretch of this plight was but commencing. He held affection for both siblings. The epiphany had hardened in the pulse. He'd witnessed Mira hurl herself afore a slug aimed for Ellie, and anew when he'd beheld Ellie's mild adeptness as she tended her maimed sibling. Two moieties of aught he'd ne'er known he lacked. "Cole," Mira uttered softly, snaring his limb with her unharmed grasp, "I must impart aught about why we truly voyaged here." Ellie's hands halted on the swath she bound. "Mira, cease!" "She must ken," Mira pressed, her orbs never quitting Cole's visage. "We didn't solely voyage to investigate the notes. We voyaged because we were both already smitten with you." The avowal lingered in the ether like haze from a quenched canter. Cole gaped at her, then at Ellie, whose face had flushed like new blooms. "We perused every note you penned, even though they were directed to another, even though we kenned it amiss. Your wortings, your musings, the manner you limed your existence and your visions, we both fell for the gent who penned those notes." Cole's thoughts spun. "But I penned to Ellie Baxter. I reckoned I was penning to one soul." "You were penning to both of us," Mira uttered with a frail grin. "Evelyn ensured both our yarns wove into those notes. She scarce reckoned on us tumbling for you in kind." Ere Cole could rejoin, Marshal Donovan materialized in the entry, his mien dour. "Mr. Ramsay, we've had a snag. Vance has fled." Marshal Donovan's utterances dispatched frost through Cole's veins. "How's that possible? I saw your aide seize him." Vance's hands wrought a diversion, sliced him free whilst we secured Mrs. Hargrove. Donovan essayed his long arm with adept thrift. "He's maimed, pharyngic, and knows these ridges better than we. Renders him mighty perilous." Cole shifted to the pane, roving the skyline. The sun neared its repose, daubing the firmament in colors of amber and scarlet that reminded him uncomfortably of gore. "He'll come back for revenge." "That's what I bank on," Donovan sourly. "We've got aides posted around the holding." "When he manifests, he won't seek a fair tussle," Mira cut in from the slab, her timber faint yet assured. Vance expended an eums, wheedling folk from the gloam. he'll essay aught cunning. As if beckoned by her utterances, the keen snap of fracturing pain resounded from the rear of the abode, trailed at once by the biting reek of fumes. "Blaze," Ellie inhaled, bolting to the pane. "He's essaying to smoke us out." Cole could spy tawny tongues already lapping at the outbuilding through the galley pane. If the blaze crept to the abode, they'd be driven outdoors where Vance could cull them singly. "We must evacuate Mira hence," Cole resolved, edging toward the slab. "I can amble," she demurred, but when she essayed to rise, her visage blanched with torment. "Like blazes you can." Cole cradled her anew. This juncture, noting how she demurred not, merely coiled her sound limb round his nape and nestled her visage against his flank. "Marshal, can your aides shield us to the paddock?" Cole queried. "The steeds are already riled by the blaze," Donovan rejoined, peering out the pane. "But there's more. Behold!" Through the haze they could spy stir nigh the flaming outbuilding, not Vance, but his lingering hands converging from sundry bearings with long arms aloft. "He's ringed us," Ellie exhaled. That's when Cole caught it, the singular trill he'd gleaned as a lad, the identical beacon his sire had employed when summoning stock. It hailed from the blaze's bearing, low and doleful. But it weren't a stock summons. "That cur," Cole grumbled, comprehension surging through him. "He's not solely essaying to smoke us out. He's wielding the blaze to drive my steeds straight at the abode." The rumble of hooves swelled, and, through the haze, they could spy his full band, nigh 3 dozen steeds, hurtling direct at them in sightless frenzy, prodded by the tongues astern and Vance's hands on the sides. "He aims to crush us," Donovan fathomed with dread. Cole regarded Mira in his limbs, then Ellie poised, wan yet resolute beside him. These females had hazarded all to unearth verity, had been double-crossed by their own blood, and now confronted demise cause of his obstinate refusal to yield his spread. But as he watched the rampart of frenzied steeds closing in, Cole forged a resolve that astonished even him. "Ellie, can you wield a long arm?" "Finer than most gents," she rejoined, sans pause. "Then guard the pains. Marshal, your aides must heed Vance's hands." Cole shifted toward the portal, yet cradling Mira. "I'm bound to halt this drive." "That's folly," Donovan objected. Cole grinned, and for the first span in hours it touched his orbs. "Nay, Marshal, that's herding." Cole trod on to the veranda with Mira yet in his limbs, confronting the rampart of frenzied steeds rumbling toward them. Abaft him, he could heed the keen snap of Ellie's long arm as she culled Vance's hands with lethal surety. "Set me down," Mira breathed urgently. "You can't halt them cradling me. I'm not forsaking you. You must." Her emerald orbs met his with vehement fervor. "Have faith." 'Gainst every urge, Cole placed her tenderly against the veranda rail. Then he trod into the yard and essayed aught that would have seemed infeasible to any sun-steed law. He commenced to croon. The low-cadenced lay his sire had imparted Enium's past. Not the keen trill that riled beasts, but the profound, soothing refrain that tamed Enium the fiercest bronc. His timbre wafted o'er the rumble of hooves, and leisurely, unthinkably, the 4 steeds commenced to slacken. But Vance weren't done. Through the haze came his timbre, uplifted in wrath. "Slay them all!"
The snap of his long arm hurled shards from the veranda post, digits from Cole's crown. Vance materialized from astern the flaming outbuilding, his maimed flank rendering his aim wobbly, but his frenzy rendering him lethal. That's when Ellie materialized, beside Cole, long arm in grasp, her mild shell supplanted by chill resolve. This concludes. Her blast struck Vance in the torso, whirling him and felling him to the turf. He essayed to uplift his iron once more, but Marshal Donovan's slug sealed what Ellie had begun. Vance Colton would wheedle no more clans, pilfer no more holdings, shatter no more existences. The steeds, heeding Cole's sustained croon, had slackened to a jittery milling around the yard. The blaze was already waning as Donovan's aides quenched it with draughts from the spring. The pressing peril had passed, but the query that had shadowed Cole since the instant two mirroring females alighted that carriage lingered unresolved. "I must impart to y'all both aught," he uttered, wheeling to confront Ellie and Mira. "I'm smitten with you both, and I scarce ken how to select betwixt y'all." The siblings swapped a glance speaking of years of joint confidences and tacit accord. "Then don't," Mira uttered, softly. "What?" Ellie advanced, claiming his grasp. "We've conferred this, Cole. Whilst you fretted over the code and the spread and Vance's ploys, we were conferring what we truly wanted." "We crave to linger," Mira pursued. "Both of us conjoin. This spread's vast enough for 3 souls who love one another." "But I can't wed you all both," Cole objected. "It's unlawful." "Wed Ellie," Mira cut in. "She's the one craving lawful ward. I'm sturdy enough to carve my own trail in the realm." She grinned, and despite her gash it shone. "But that don't mean I'm departing. This strikes like hearth." Ellie flushed, but demurred not her sibling. "If you'll claim us both in whatever vein suits, we're weary of solitude, Cole." All three poised there in the waning glow, ringed by the leavings of strife, yet gazing toward a morrow none had charted. Cole fathomed that at times the best remedies were those that flouted all edicts. 3 months hence, the union of Cole Ramsay and Ellie Baxter was the buzz over 3 shires, not for the bride, but for the attendant who tarried to aid steer the spread. Kinfolk murmured, but the trio were too happy to heed. Marshal Donovan called betimes, ever noting how thriving the spread fared neath its odd oversight. Evelyn Hargrove drew 2 years in national lockup for postal deceit, and Vance Colton's ploys died with him in the grit behind Cole's outbuilding. Sometimes love defies the rules. Sometimes it writes its own. Hey riders, if you're catching this from a town tonight, what town's got you holed up? Holler it in the chat so we can tip our hats to your corner of the frontier in these dusty sagas. If you savored this yarn, tap that clip on your display now to dive into another heart-pounding frontier legend where fate and grit clash in manners you scarce foresaw. Don't miss beating that like key and subscribing. Smash like and subscribe for more spine-tingling rides. And one more holler, like if this yarn had you roped in tight, and subscribe to Saddle Up with the Crew. Your backing means the trail to us.